Yikes.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are, of course, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Welcome in. It is Saturday night. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, coming to you live from the state of Indiana. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me from back in lovely Nebraska. I just watched, you just watched, we all watched Nebraska get beat down 56-7 by the Indiana Hoosiers. Connor, this was a disaster of epic proportions. In my post-game column, I wrote that you as a Nebraska fan, as an observer of Nebraska football, now ought to question everything that you know and everything that you think you know about Nebraska football after its 56-7 loss. This, in my estimation, was the worst showing by a Nebraska football team since it went to Texas Tech in 2004, just more than 20 years ago, and lost 70-10 and became a national laughingstock in Bill Callahan's first year. We're now into Matt Rhule's second year, and this is where we're at.
Oh, man. I'm glad you mentioned that because I don't want to take credit away from Indiana, but my main takeaway after the game was that I was way more wrong about Nebraska than I was wrong about Indiana. Like I think Indiana, we gave plenty of credit to Indiana throughout the week on the show. I think they're good. I don't think they did anything that was too, out of the ordinary that I sort of didn't expect. I just thought Nebraska would be in a better position to do something about it. And man, it was fundamentally a disaster for Nebraska, both offensively and defensively. The wheels fell off. They couldn't do just routine things in the game. Pick up blocks. Everything was hard for them. Couldn't tackle. I mean, it was.
Why is it so hard?
That's a great starting point, Mitch. Why does it look so hard for them?
So we've seen Nebraska play games like this in the past few years. So I'm not skipping over all of the blowout losses that Nebraska suffered against Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State, and even a couple against Iowa. The Iowa ones are perhaps in a different category, and they weren't necessarily this dramatic. The thing about those games against the Michigan and Ohio States of the world is you knew when you watched the game that there was a better player for Michigan and Ohio State at just about every position across from a Nebraska player. So it was somewhat understandable, not acceptable, but somewhat understandable. Like you could reason with yourself why you were seeing the game that you were seeing as it was unfolding in front of you en route to 56-7. That is not the case with Indiana. Indiana has some nice players, several nice players. Curtis Rourke is a nice player. He's a very good quarterback. Nebraska was giving him far too much respect, far too much room to operate in the first half, and he didn't play in the second half. Indiana still scored 28 points after halftime. The receivers, the running backs, the defensive players for Indiana are all people who would have to compete hard for positions at Nebraska. I don't think there are more players on the field out of the all 22 who lean. I don't lean Indiana when I look at the talent as I see these two teams. They're fairly even, I would say, if not an edge to Nebraska in terms of who has the better players on the field. Who was the better team today? It's not even close. Yeah. Almost every single snap, Indiana was better than Nebraska, which is just, as I said, it's a shocking result to see.
I just thought one thing, it just snowballed so fast, and it's been 19 games now in the Matt Rhule era, and one of the things that we've sort of consistently talked about all the way through the 18 games, or 19 games now is like, and this goes back a long time. It's the mental side. What happens to Nebraska? Why does it get punched in the face and then it doesn't respond well, or why does it walk into these environments and it just doesn't feel like they're they're in the right headspace. Matt Rhule said after the game that he didn't expect that. I didn't expect that. Nobody expected that performance from Nebraska. But they go down. The first play of the game was a missed tackle, and they only ended up getting 6 yards out of it. Nebraska misses a tackle, and I'm like, it's a lot. That's a bad omen right there. 3rd and 1, you got to over pursue. They hit a long run on it, and then they get in scoring position. And that's by Nebraska's best defensive player, John Bullock. And, there was a blown protection on a 3rd down that Nebraska had on offense.
How about the opening kickoff, Indiana's opening kickoff?
Bounds at the 1 yard line. I can't this is simple. These are things that regular teams all across the country can execute. And Nebraska should obviously be able to execute with great reason because they're a fine football team. They're, like you said, the talent thing is totally but I've seen way less talented teams execute things like this. It's just unbelievable how Nebraska gets into these situations and they just can't, they lose their minds. And unfortunately, that was everybody today. It was not like we used to say, Dylan Raiola, he's kind of separate. You fell into that trap too. I mean, I don't think he had any help around him today, but my goodness, it was a mess.
Making ill-advised throws back across his body, trying to do too much, scrambling in and out of trouble, and just not looking comfortable really in any situation. When he was pressured, he didn't look comfortable. When he didn't get pressured, he didn't look comfortable. I really don't think his receivers were open downfield, but if they were, Dylan wasn't seeing them. He fell right into the trap, as you said, that has just kind of sucked Nebraska down this hole. I want to spend just a second talking about that opening kickoff and just what that did for Nebraska's mentality. Because, hey, you give up a touchdown, fine. We've seen it before where Nebraska's given up a touchdown and then rebounded and done well defensively the rest of the game and been able to come back from that. 7-0 is not all that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And then that happens, and I think that's where the doubt starts to come in. And this was Ja'Cory Barney, who hasn't made those kind of freshman mistakes. And I feel like he's somebody that you don't expect to get in the I'm pressing and I'm trying to play too hard. I'm trying too hard to do all the right things, but you can't in any situation give your team the ball at the 1 yard line. And to play off that, just real quick. So Nebraska comes out, it's at the 1. And it comes out with a fullback in the power set, and Dante Dowdell gets 2 yards, so they get a little bit of breathing room at the 3. And the next 8 plays we saw, which were 5 on the opening possession because they did get a first down on a pass to Thomas Fedoni, and then the first 3 plays on the next possession, all in poor field position or on Nebraska's side of the field. They're all passes. So Matt Rhule said after the game that what Nebraska's plan was in this game was to get big in big formations, to run the ball, to be physical. How does that jive with 8 of your first 9 plays? And the only one that wasn't a pass is when you're backed up at the 1 yard line after the opening kick. Something here is not connecting. If you're talking about having this physical style and that's what you want to do against Indiana, impose your will, how are you throwing 8 consecutive passes at the start of the game, all in a 7-0 hole? It was 7-0 for all of that. Yeah. Nebraska was not in big trouble at that point. Why are you not even trying to run the football?
I mean, I'll add to that, Mitch. Even you're down 21-7. That you're getting the ball coming back in the second half. It's not it's not this thing where you have to obviously there's more and more pressure on you, and obviously Nebraska feels like its best route to getting yards on offense is through the air at this point. But you're right. I mean, it was just panicked. It was panicked, and I felt that from everybody. And so throw the offensive coordinator into that conversation again. It was
question everything. The offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, because it wasn't good today. I mean, he's been good most of the time, but how many offenses has he faced like this? And it was awful. The defense was awful today.
Yeah, I thought there was reasonable expectation, Mitch, that Nebraska's defense could kind of hem them in, to keep them in front. We've seen examples of offenses like this before with frankly better players. Now, Indiana has a couple pretty dang good receivers, and they do the right things. Their quarterback puts the ball on the once again. This is not about taking credit away from Indiana. They have good players. Surratt's a really good wide receiver. And their quarterback puts the ball on the mark. But like you said, he didn't play the second half of the game. And then their backup put the ball on the mark a few times as well. And their running backs made plays. But there was a reasonable expectation to where, from a matchup perspective, Nebraska's defense could keep everything in front of them and not allow first drive of the game, that rushing touchdown streak is broken. And it wasn't just by luck. It wasn't just we got down here from an 85-yard pass. No, they hit a big chunk run to get in position to do that. He was getting gashed right away. So yeah, it's a total, big picture centering moment. What is this team? Looking ahead, it's Ohio State coming up next. So hard to find yourself against Ohio State. So I mean, totally off on what I could expect from a reasonable perspective from this team, for sure.
We can talk about Ohio State a little bit and how the complexion of the rest of the season has changed today. Well, maybe with what UCLA did and the fact that UCLA has a bye week and what we can expect in Nebraska. Maybe we get more into that on Monday. We can talk about that a little bit in the second segment. Before we take a break, I want to touch on something that you said about the environment, about coming into an environment like Nebraska faced in Bloomington. So this was not a hostile environment. This was, and I say that in the relative context of what you see around the Big Ten. This game with big noon kickoff here and a sellout crowd of 52,000. This was,
you're going to see it in a lot of places.
This was pretty tame. Indiana, for all they could muster, they kind of hover around the basketball arena across the street and they pay homage to Assembly Hall. They're counting down the days until, they had their big basketball tip-off thing last night. I think there was a lot of excitement, or Friday night. I think there was a lot of excitement around that. And then they were like, oh, hey, look, there's a football game over there tomorrow. And the TV show is going to be there. They had people with megaphones for Fox who were in signs that they were holding before the game that were recruiting kids from the frat houses. And then as they were walking around the outside of Assembly Hall and saying, come over here for a chance to be on live TV. So that they were doing that. It was you can be on The Price is Right or something. They don't know how to put on a big time football game. And so this was not hostility to the max. I'm not denigrating the Indiana fans. They've never had, or at least since the 1950s, they've never had more than an 8-win season. This is Nebraska basketball, talking to people about what it's like to have success in the NCAA tournament. They have a good team and they're doing a nice job. But what Nebraska sees next week, totally different. It's going to be that's a hostile environment.
Yeah, that's a different thing. All right, so we got scattershot thoughts all over the place here. We'll continue with those as we return. It's our reaction shows. Nebraska loses 56-7 to Indiana, and they fall to 5-2 on the season. We'll be back after this. All right, it's Apper here, and we got a new sponsor here, the Locked On Nebraska podcast. It's called Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol, probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking alcohol. That is, maybe this is the right place, right time for this ad. Yeah, how it works: when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your hangover the next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Then you drink responsibly, and then you'll be ready to go the next morning. Here's how to use it. Z-Biotics, drink the pre-alcohol at the start of the night, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night of sleep, and enjoy the day after. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on your day. Head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Z-Biotics, backed with 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege. Use that code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, 15% off at checkout.
And Mitch Sherman here to tell you about Game Time, because it's getting late in the college football season. The baseball playoffs, it's getting really late. We are close to having a World Series matchup. We will have one of those things set by early in this next week. It's time to get excited about fall sports. Before you know it, it's going to be November, Thanksgiving football, basketball, postseason World Series baseball. Game Time is going to make getting tickets much easier for any event you want to go to. When it comes to baseball, it's an authorized ticket marketplace. Prices on the app, they go down the closer you get to the start of the game that you want to see or the event you want to see. Game Time makes tickets getting easier and faster. So wherever you want to go, if it's a hot ticket, it's there for you on Game Time. I love that you can see flash deals. You can see views from your seat. You can customize your spot in the stadium or the arena. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app today. Game Time, last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. Indiana 56, Nebraska 7. Not my wildest dreams. I thought I'd be saying that 56-7. That was
neither did Matt Rhule. He was
that was
admittedly
bad.
shocked by this. So I wonder, do we have to wonder like what kind of a pulse does Matt Rhule have on this Nebraska team? I mean, I kind of come out of this in the mode of just like, all right, everything, like throw the paper up in the air, like whatever we thought, like let's reconsider. So he was outspoken about being very surprised that he said, I usually see things coming. I didn't see this coming. So, okay. What else don't you know about your team at this point?
I wonder what I guess we'll find out on Monday. But he'll watch the tape and he'll take the emotion out of it and he'll watch the TV copy and all the stuff like that. Like I wonder what the feeling is and how it could have possibly got to this point, because Nebraska had very, very few moments of that game where they looked like they were gonna be able to mount anything together
in the game.
Obviously if you're pointing to one back-breaking play in the game, it's Dante Dowdell's fumble on a 4th down conversion. When you're already down 14-0, that hurt. I mean, really bad. And I do think he would have had the first down for the record.
I think he had it. He was across the line.
Yeah. So, I mean, that one was obviously really hard, and obviously, Nebraska was not going to win after that happened.
Well, it was 7-0 at that point.
It was 7 or 14.
Yeah, it was 7-0, and I agree. It was a huge play because you get this sense, like you sensed it from I sensed it from the beginning with Indiana and the ease with which it scored on the opening drive, and then Nebraska, we went over the mistake it made on special teams to start, and then all the passing at the beginning of the game that wasn't working. You could tell Dylan was a little bit out of rhythm with his receivers. He was never in sync with his wide receivers today. I felt like it wasn't desperation by any stretch when it was 7-0, but like it was a spot where Nebraska needed to get some points. The one that was the nail in the coffin, and you might argue this is way after the final nail was in the coffin, but Nebraska goes into the locker room down 28-7. Things look pretty bleak. They come out at the start of the third quarter and mount a pretty nice drive, and then get into a situation where it's 4th down near the goal line, and Raiola throws an interception that was basically a pick six. It was a 79-yard return. Ramir Johnson chased down the Indiana defender, and Indiana scored a couple plays later. But that obviously was the point in the game where you said, okay, well, there's not going to be any kind of miraculous comeback here for the Huskers.
Yeah. I mean, so it's hard to pinpoint one or two plays in this game, but I'll be curious to see and hear what Matt Rhule thinks as he pours back over, not just the game, but like the pregame and, just what that was all about. I guess we could address this. Nebraska did wear all white uniforms on Saturday. People had many takes about that. I don't think they were responsible for Nebraska's absolutely putrid football playing.
Obviously not. And I don't even think that any of the players who wore the white uniforms have knowledge of the ugly history of Nebraska in white uniforms. Think like Iowa State 1992. None of them were alive
I
for
do
Iowa
remember
State
that.
1992. They don't know the name Marv Seiler. They probably don't. Well, many of them don't know the name Tommy Frazier, who was Nebraska's true freshman quarterback in that game.
Do they know the name? Do they know the name Melvin Gordon? The Melvin Gordon game happened in those white uniforms.
400-yard game.
Yeah.
Did it? Wow. It really is an ugly history. I was told in the press box that the Georgia Tech Citrus Bowl after the 90 or 91 season was an all white uniform thing. Like fine. I don't know why
I can't recall too many times since the Melvin Gordon 2014
they don't do it
game
very
in
often.
Madison. I can't remember too many times since. And I'm not counting alternate all white uniforms, which they've done a couple times since then as well. But it is an ugly history. But Nebraska just didn't play well enough.
How about the bottom falling out for Nebraska in the turnover category? So I think we worried a little bit, or I did, about putting the jinx on Nebraska because we talked about the turnovers last week and in wondering with our second half of the season predictions and what was going to happen. Hey, the Huskers were +6 for the season, hadn't lost the turnover battle outright in any game this season. Well, they turned it over 5 times against Indiana. And not only did Nebraska turn it over 5 times, it also went 0 for 5 on fourth down. Now, 3 of those turnovers were on fourth down. So you know, turning it over on fourth down versus just not converting the fourth down is the same thing.
Yeah.
So you can't double up on that. But that's 7 possessions out of 11. That Nebraska had 11 possessions in the game. 7 of those possessions, it gave the ball away to Indiana without getting anything for it. Normally, you give the ball away, you get something for it. You get a punt, you get 40 extra yards, whatever, or a score. You get to kick it off. 7 times out of 11 when Nebraska had the ball, it just handed the ball back to Indiana via the turnover or an unsuccessful fourth down attempt. That is the opposite of complementary football. We would call that losing football.
Well, and if you want to talk margin too, I mean, Indiana's 1 turnover was as time expired on a Hail Mary before half. So it's nonsensical.
Basically 5-0.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, there was that piece of it too. We wondered out loud this week on the show just how we threw out some scenarios like how Nebraska would sort of react if they were down in the game and could they win it on Indiana's terms? Like all those talking points sort of came up. I gotta be honest with you, like I didn't expect that, as just to pull back the refrain from Rhule that he used after the game today. But like Nebraska seemed panicked. They seemed sped up. They didn't, even though they were down a sizable margin in the game, it's not like they were taking these shots down the field. It was all just kind of, short and no room for receivers to run, no time for Rhule to make, the proper progressions, or maybe he wasn't making them fast enough. I mean, it was a total mess on the offensive side of the ball. And that's, obviously it was on defense too. You give it 56, but like offense, man, rough.
The scoring drive Nebraska had was a very out of character drive for Nebraska. They came out when down 14-0 and went not just tempo, not just no huddle, but very fast, as fast as, I mean, they were running a 2-minute drill or even like a 1-minute drill. It was quick to the line and snap it as fast as you could. And they found a little bit of rhythm doing that. And interestingly, didn't go back to that much. I don't know. In some ways they're uncomfortable running that style regularly. I think it's more of the complementary football aspect to it. Like you don't want to just burn through 3 plays and then give the ball back to Indiana.
100%. There came a point in that game where they had to make the decision. Obviously it didn't work out for them, but I think they were kind of making decisions on like, all right, how bad is it going to look after the game ends? We don't want it to look that bad. I want to bring up one more thing to you, Mitch, before we get out of here. Or I don't know, we can go as long as you want. I tweeted this during the game, and I tweeted it, I think, after Quentin Ives got tackled by a kicker on a kick return. And it wasn't just him, but I had to blurt it out at this point. Why does it seem like Nebraska players get tackled so easily. They just fall over like instantly upon
And they get touched.
contact. I don't understand that, because you watch their backs and you watch their wide receivers, and maybe they're more physical, whatever. But like, those dudes are running through contact. They're like, yes, bring this contact and let's go. Or they're spinning through contact. But like, Nebraska players are expecting contact and going down with the contact. And I can't, like, you're just not, you're going to have to make plays. And that's what Matt Rhule talks about all the time. Like, you have to do some extra things. Maybe the play gets you 6 yards, but you got to make it 15, if you're a running back or whatever. It boggles my mind, because I watch other teams break tackles all the time. Nebraska just doesn't do it. And then they miss tackles on the defensive side.
Yeah, the running backs on Saturday, 20 carries for 49 yards, only one carry that was more than 9 yards. So they're not getting through contact. Clearly, that's an indicator of that. The one that I remember from the Rutgers game, the big one, is Jalen Lloyd being brought down on the fake punt by kind of a fingernail tackle from the Rutgers player who was the return man back in punt formation. So, like, the last guy who expects to be making a tackle on that play, and he just got in front of Lloyd.
Stuck his arm in.
Yeah. But you see that with the running backs too, and it's like, it's kind of an ugly problem. Like, this is not what a team is supposed to look like, that is physically conditioned in the way that Nebraska is. And we see them running drills in the spring and in the fall where they're going through the machine with the big arms, and the running backs have to go through it. And again, much like I said when we talked about Nebraska's offensive game plan here, to be physical and get big and impose its will, run the ball, run play action off of the run. Something with this philosophy of the way it runs and its ability to break tackles is just not connecting. Like, it's not getting there from the practice field and what they want to do when they scheme this up to actually being executed in the game. And they're 5-2. I don't want to make it seem like, everything we're saying is just awful about this everything was awful about Saturday. I don't know that means that everything is awful about this season and about this program.
Yeah.
But that said, let's look, before we get out of here, at what Nebraska has ahead and how quickly or dramatically things are going to have to change to get this season, just keep it above water. Nebraska has very little chance next week at Ohio State. And the more likely scenario is that this damages Nebraska's morale and its confidence moving into November, because it will have lost 56-7 at Indiana and then by some ugly margin against Ohio State.
I have no idea what to expect for next week. I have no earthly idea what to expect for Nebraska.
So a year ago, Nebraska,
obviously they're playing against themselves. Like, I mean,
yeah,
you're not going to win the game. All right. So play yourself to a standard. I have no idea what it's going to be.
It'll be interesting to even hear what the talking points are from Nebraska when the players talk, how many guys talk. There were no seniors who talked to the media on Saturday, and, people listening to this or watching us may not care about that, but and some of it was that it was Nebraska's decision. They were just getting the guys out of there. I don't think Matt Rhule wanted many players to speak. He put Dylan Raiola up in front of the podium. They put Jalen Lloyd, they put Jamari Butler, and then they were gone. So, all right, I won't dwell on that, but I wonder what they're going to say when they talk on Tuesday. Like, it's going to be hard for them to even come up with things the way to answer questions when you lose like that, and then you have to go play Ohio State. But the ugly reality is they're going to have UCLA on November 2nd coming off of a bye, and the Bruins just beat Rutgers on Saturday. So they're getting better, I guess. And that's kind of a must win for Nebraska, because after that, it's at USC, which is struggling. And then you're playing Wisconsin, which continues to surge. And Iowa, as we tape this thing, is down at Michigan State, but it's a one-score game. So we'll see how that turns out. But that's going to be a tough game on Black Friday. So
yeah, I mean, it's a whole bunch of 50-50 games. But I sort of thought today was that for Nebraska, and they lost 56-7. So yeah, total reset on the expectations through 7 games. It's a shame.
Yeah. All right, should we get out of here and just move this thing along to Monday? We will. We'll
there's a
lot
more. There's a lot more topics that we'll still hit, of course. As we go through.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to react from this, and we'll spin this forward. We'll turn it into conversation about where Nebraska goes from here, what the problems are, and how to address them. I think even in my coverage today, it was more just trying to like assess the just how disgusting that was. And as the week goes on, and we'll do it on this show, we'll talk about what actually happened for Nebraska on the offensive side of the ball, what happened on the defensive side of the ball, why did they continue after the bye week to not seem to be able to fix things on the special teams phase. That's all going to be coming up on the Locked On Nebraska podcast as we move forward into week 9 in college football. I want to thank you for listening to this reaction podcast, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. Lots of wild stuff happening around college football, not just in the Big Ten, but everywhere in the sport. Spencer McLaughlin has got you covered to give you all that you need getting out of week 8 into week 9 in college football. You can find the link to that Locked On College Football podcast in the description of our show, so there's no need to search. All of it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.